He continues, this is a foolish mix. So you can't mix new patch unshrunk cloth with an old piece of cloth. Again, let me just pause and interject. MacArthur is simply reminding us of the common sense factor of Yeshua's teaching here. And this must have been necessary in order for Yeshua's application to be common sense as well. So if you think about it, the fact that Yeshua used something that was not very technical, something that any common person, perhaps even children, could even wrap their mind around, then with equal precision, you would think that the application that modern pastors give this part of the parable or anecdote about the cloth part, if the application applies to Judaism is out, Christianity is in, Old Testament is out, New Testament is in, Law of Moses is out, Law of Christ is in, Israel's out, the church is in, etc. If that application was so easy to understand, then why did and you can look up history to fact check me on this, why did so many first century Jews and Gentiles still continue to practice a religion that would be identified outwardly as Judaism, a sect of Judaism, a form of Jewish religion? In fact, if it was so apparent and easy to understand and apply that Yeshua is trying to get them to understand that, hey, it's a no-brainer, the old is out, the new is in, then why didn't he just say it that way? So those are some, not all, some of the reasons why I'm leery of this particular application about the old is out and the new is in. I think there was a split eventually between Judaism and Christianity, Gentile forms of following after God and Jesus, and Jewish forms of following after God and Jesus, and eventually following after God, right? The church and the synagogue split, if you want to call it that. Yes, that's true. But that wouldn't come till really centuries later. The split wouldn't really be formalized. Yes, the seeds were being sown, and Judaism was one of the first ones to begin to pull away from the newly formed religion that we might call Christianity. So that's true as well. Didn't help that the temple would later on get destroyed in 70 AD, further kind of fueling this animosity and split between opinions on the Jewish side of the house and opinions on the Gentile Christian side of the house. So, but we can continue to talk about those a little bit later. Let's go on with Pastor MacArthur's notes. He goes on to say, apostate Judaism's rituals and ceremonies are a worn-out garment, and you cannot patch the holes in it with a piece of the gospel. It's not compatible. Jesus didn't come with a message to patch up the old system. Instead, he came with a message to replace it altogether. And again, if you're not kind of reading between the lines here, essentially what Pastor MacArthur is saying is that Jesus came to take the teachings of Moses and essentially explain that it's worn out, it's damaged, it's run its course, it's not compatible with the new way of approaching my Father that I'm teaching, and therefore your ritual has to give way to relationship. Almost as if you can't have it both ways. I sometimes wonder out loud if Pastor MacArthur envisions a viable Messianic Judaism where you have a Jew who believes in God and loves God with all his heart, and yet at the same time espouses a genuine faith in Jesus and practices the religion that God gave to his people Israel, right, handed down through Moses. I'm not talking about a Messianic Jew who simply repackages rabbinic Judaism. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a Messianic Jew who's a believer in Jesus, who turns his heart and soul and spirit into the genuine law of God as given by Moshe and upheld by Yeshua and modeled by the Messiah, and therefore lives his life in accordance with the biblical truths, not necessarily the rabbinic perspective. So, again, if the indictment, and I give Pastor MacArthur this, I give him this allowance because I've never had a dialogue with Pastor MacArthur, so I can't say factually 100% that I know exactly what he's trying to get at here in his sermon. But I get the impression that really his indictment is more accurate if it's leveled against rabbinic Judaism, the form of Judaism that openly, outwardly, historically, systematically, categorically rejects Jesus and anything that has to do with Christianity and things like that. Okay, that would be an accurate accusation if he's talking about the bankruptcy and things like that. But unfortunately, it's very difficult for most Christians to separate biblical Judaism from rabbinic Judaism. Many Christians aren't even aware that there's a difference between these two types of religions. So it's necessary for us today, I think, to identify these two separate types of religion that are both built foundationally upon the law of Moses. However, rabbinic Judaism diverges from the law of Moses when it introduces all of its oral traditions, its oral Torah, its Talmud, its sayings of the rabbis, and all of these midrash explanations and things like that. That's halakha, veers off in a different direction than the law of Moses had intended the people to go. And thus, there is a difference between the two religions. Let's continue.